Welcome back, Doug. We had a really productive meeting last week when you came and gave us an overview of the draft network diagram that you created. Our CISO Elvis Moreland wasn't able to join last week. He was putting out some fires for Nova Shield, but he's back today. So any outstanding questions you have, he's the man. He has the answers.
That's awesome. Excellent. All right, Elvis, I just wanted to bring you up to speed. This is the network diagram I delivered along with all the notes that we took. And then this is the cleaned up version.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That we started doing. So there is typically a gap between what I hear and what I draw. And it's not drawing capabilities. It's just sometimes you forget to ask all the questions or you'll say something that I picked up differently. So what we like to do at this stage is say, this is what I believe your network diagram is. I'd like to give you some time to take a look at this. And I know you were busy, but maybe you can give a couple inputs here so that we make sure it's right. It's fine. We can go back to this and fix anything we need to throughout the assessment, but it is best to get this as solid as possible because we're defining what our boundaries are.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that strikes me from the start, would we have another pop out for the office network, or is that the level of detail you want to leave it at?
That's the level of detail I have.
And the reason why I'm asking is, we ran into that on a level 1 assessment today, where we went into the question and the objectives actually talked about a DMZ, an isolated network.
Yeah. Okay. So let me see. I think I need to move this to a slideshow.
If we could, we'd probably make it easier on you. We'd just do a pop out, with the next page. Okay, this is what our office network actually looks like in more detail.
Yeah, so give me some highlights of that. So we're talking about how the office network is defined by the firewall, is that right? Or switches?
Yes, exactly. So at the edge, you're going to have, a next gen. Behind that, you're probably going to have another interface to tie into a second tier firewall configuration. But between that first tier and second tier, there should be some sort of, and it's typically where you're going to hang off, your guest network for internet access.
We don't want to put the WAP in the DMZ because it also has the employee wireless, unless you have a separate WAP for the guest. Do you?
Exactly. So one WAP for the guests go directly out the internet, and then one WAP internally for the employee network.
And that would or would not be in the DMZ, the one for the employee network?
That would not be in the DMZ.
Okay. So we could kind of keep this guy right here and just put a wireless access point in here in the DMZ.
Yeah.
And other DMZ stuff like, is there an email server? Is there a file server? Is there other FTP, anything like that?
I think we'd probably move all that into the Azure environment. The only thing I would say is your normal local network service like DNS, NTP, SNMP, that's got to be protected probably on the internal network.
Right. Any other pieces of equipment in the DMZ?
Thinking right now, VPN. Oh my gosh, yeah. If you're going to allow external access, your VPN will be there. That'll be in that hosted environment as a bastion.
Let's see. Is there another VPN? Because we've got the Nova Shield issued laptops like right here. They have VPNs on them, right? They have an application and an individual certificate, I'm going to assume. But that is for them getting to what? To the MS365 GCC High environment? Not the same VPN we're talking about here.
Right.
This VPN, it serves a different business function?
Correct.
Okay. We'll put a green box around this because for us, that means not CUI. We'll label it DMZ. There's already a green box around this subnet, which is one of the internal subnets that's protected by this DMZ. The other internal subnet that's protected by the DMZ is this guy here.
Yeah.
I think we could do it in one drawing without making things too complicated. There's a bit of room here.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
What do you think, Derek?
That looks good, and I see why we pay you the big bucks. I think of that.
All right, so we can put that in there. I had a couple of questions. Now, these are for MSSP Tech Solutions. I think I know the answer, but we want to clarify. MSP Tech Solutions, their technical support, their help desk, etc., is U.S. citizens only, I believe.
Yes. Yes, that's part of the contract.
Okay. And they have a backup server in their own Azure environment for you. I'm assuming that's a governant tenant.
Yes.
Okay. And with those things, I'm pretty satisfied we've got a good boundary and network architecture here.
I agree. It looks phenomenal.
That's awesome. Okay. And this helps us a lot. So the next steps, which I'm not prepared to go through right now,
Okay.
but I want to walk through and get you prepared for the next meeting, is we've created the network diagram. That's done. And in that, we identified the assets, we connected the elements, we defined the boundaries. I think we even mapped data flows. But the next thing I would do is go over those data flows and make sure they're all correct. Remember, we started with, here's a description of Nova Shield.
Oh my God.
And we made this draft diagram, and then we corrected it to that. Right. So that's where we're at. Inside of here, boy, we sure have listed a whole lot of assets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next step is going to be what we just done, review and validate. If you have anyone else on your side who needs to take a look at it, that's great. The change that I'm going to make is simple. That'll be done today. And then we'll call this, a final draft, I like to say, right? The final draft of the network diagram. The next steps are to review the data flow, because we haven't talked about, where does the CUI come from? Do you get it from your customer? Do you create it? Do you share it with anyone? Those kind of things are interesting. We might want to talk about that. We would want to confirm the boundaries, because we've just put on notes and pictures of firewalls, right? So some of those are logical separations. Some of them are physical separations. We've talked about administrative separations. We want to confirm those things. We have listed MSP Tech as an ESP. We want to see, are there any others, right? Those are ESPs. We want to formally list them. It matters a whole lot in CMMC. Are they an ESP or a CSP? An external, everyone's external, right? But are they a cloud service provider?
In the rule, they do draw that distinction. Yep. One of the distinctions is if that MSP is essentially offering like an on-demand cloud service that anyone could go and purchase, let's say from their website, and provision it without having to directly talk to anyone at that MSP. That's going to be one of the key facets.
You're looking right here as a CSP, is that right?
Yeah.
Because of that.
Exactly. Because I can go provision a server in Azure without talking to anyone at Microsoft. Everything is on demand, done on that portal. Mm-hmm. But our MSP doesn't offer that type of service. And so that's one of the reasons why we keep them in the category of ESP.
Yep. I believe that would be the distinction there, but we'll try to list out anyone else. Does anyone come in and refurbish your printer? Does anyone, I don't know, configure your phones for you before you see them? Or does anyone empty the shred bins for you? Right? There may be some other service providers here. But we want to carefully just make sure we list them.
Okay.
Right, so while you're identifying ESPs, I want to get both of your opinions, because I run across this all the time.
Okay.
Either one of these small contractors are using Sage, or they're using NetSuite, or some sort of cloud-based hosted financials, and they're billing the government based on part number, service, you name it. There's a lot of detail in there that does fall under CUI. What are your thoughts about including those services as an ESP?
It certainly sounds like it. I mean, you've just defined CUI as in their network. It comes from me, right? I give them the part number. Gosh, that sounds like it's very clearly an ESP. Are there any arguments against that?
Yeah, there's arguments for and arguments against. I've told them I have to include it because I'm on the consulting side, but it's up to your auditor to make that final decision. I'm going to include it as part of the scope.
Yeah. What's the argument against?
The argument against is, well, it's just a financial system, and that's really where they're pushing back. They're like, well, do we have to go out and get 2 instances, 2 financial services? And I'm like, no, but you can include that as part of your COI boundary.
Like you, Elvis, I see that kind of frequently. What I advise them to do, if it's possible, is to limit the amount of information they're including in their financial system, where if they don't have to include information that may be deemed as CUI or FCI, then not to include that. The goal is to get it out of scope. We don't want those financial systems in scope. But if they can't do it, then point, that's technically it's in scope.
Some of them are ship makers or construction companies where they have to be very detailed about those materials and those parts. And yeah, you just crossed the line when you get to that level of detail.
Yeah, but do they have to be specific in the billing? Or I guess,
Right.
let me back up a second. A good discussion for this group would be descoping.
Yes.
I
That
think
would
that would be
be.
very good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you could change the color of the information, which I agree with you, Derek, that if you could change the color of the information, yes. But in some instances you can't because for example, a ship maker. I worked with one ship maker and their information had to be so detailed because that's what they were charging. That's why you end up paying $800 for, a hammer or some
Yeah.
screwdriver that can only fit on a submarine. It's very detailed.
Yeah. And I
But
recently
but
heard.
does the billing have to be that detailed? Like,
Yeah.
custom screwdriver could be the billing, and then there's no CUI there. Or custom screwdriver number 10 CUI.
Yeah, it depends on the government customer, or it could
Yeah.
depend on the prime as well. Though.
Yeah, we'll try to negotiate that. But I recently heard Carrie from Carrie Solutions address this, and she mentioned like if it becomes like CUI once if it's saying 10 bolts that are 3/4 of a millimeter thick or something really specific in that sense where it's potentially releasing that sensitive information versus like Doug just said 10 bolts, or at that point then that level of detail is not CUI or technical information. But if it gets into the specifics like you're kind of just mentioning, Elvis, that can be a problem. We want to try to de-scope that as much as possible.
Yeah, I think it comes down to how specified the information is that the contract is requiring.
Yep, good point of discussion. Doug, also as far as network diagramming for CMMC, do you typically include like the connections like TLS or to that level?
I didn't do that yet because I think that's next, right?
Okay.
I put VPN and internet connection. I would like to know, is it TLS 1.2?
Yes.
Is it
Okay.
1.1? Or what else? I think everything is at least HTTPS. I mean, you can't get away from that anymore.
You'd be surprised. There's still some legacy stuff out there. I kid you not. These mom
Yeah, I
and
believe
pop
you.
shops are
Oh, yeah.
still
Oh,
working
yeah.
on machines that have been end of life for
Right.
7-8 years.
Yeah. I just don't see the argument for that not being an ESP. And I guess my best argument for that would be if this financial system was inside of on your prem, you consider it in scope, don't you? But out of the
Systems.
prem, why would it not be included?
Exactly.
It
And I
makes
asked
sense.
one, the guy that creates the blueprints. I said, can you pull all the information out that you need to manage this project? And he said, no, I can't. So they're managing their project and they're creating their billables based on those little details in the project, and that's how they get paid. Yeah, it's too
Yeah,
hard
that
to
would be-
separate.
I don't get
Yeah.
that. I don't get why you can't tokenize the part numbers.
Yeah, I don't either, but it's just they're making custom stuff for the Navy. That's what happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I've been on some of those programs long time ago. One of my first jobs was cutting wire to a specific length, and I had no idea why, but it was in support of a Tempest system on a submarine.
Yeah, exactly. It had to fit a certain length in the bulkhead, and that was it.
To this slide.
ESPs. Yeah. Would you ask a question about, okay, what kind of drafting, what kind of project management services you're using in cloud?
I don't
to do your work?
have those lined up, but I think it's a great idea, Elvis. We should probably have a list of here's things that we might have forgot, right? I like to ask in general, how do you communicate with your customer? How do they give you information? How do you bill them? How do you ship them the deliverables? Let's talk all about that because they might go, oh, we put it in box. It's like, well, there you go. That's an
exactly.
ESP.
Just let them talk.
Let them
Yeah,
tell about their
exactly.
billing and their project management and their customer management and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just taught a CCP course 2 weeks ago, and part of still of the current training for the CCP course, they do have a basically like a fictitious organization you're doing for going through the training, and that was one of the questions that asked about like for that organization they were using QuickBooks, and then the question came up, was QuickBooks in scope or not? And for that scenario, it was determined as not in scope because they didn't put detailed information like we were discussing, but it did give a caveat if they were to put detailed information that potentially could bring it into scope.
Which is the same as everything else. Same
Right.
same with Box, same with
Yep,
Salesforce.
exactly.
Do
Yep.
you put detailed information there or not?
Yep. And like Elvis mentioned, they're doing project management within it as well. Oh, yeah, that's a problem.
So I think we've just concluded that this thing, you can't just call it done because you've done the network diagram and you've got the high level ESP and CSP that we mentioned. There may be some others, so it's worth a discussion.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, yeah, especially if they're using Sage or some sort of cloud-based service to manage all their blueprints.
Ooh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No
Those gotta
blueprints are
be-
likely going to be CTI.
There's no tokenization of those.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, okay, what are you using to manage these projects? And I think you hit the right terminology, Doug. If you're accepting CUI, great. Okay, that's one part of the process. But if you think about it, once you move into a project management, how you managing the project, and then how you bill. So if you look at it from at least 3 different steps in that process, you got a customer interface and RFP and responses to RFPs, and then you got project management, and then you got billing. So if you think of it logically, we might want to break it down to that level. Okay, so how are you accepting RFPs? How are you responding to RFPs? And then
Right.
once you get a contract award, how do you manage the project? And then how do you bill as the
Right.
last?
Yeah, that's one thing. We just jumped into drawing the network diagram. We didn't talk about the project has started and what paperwork do you have from the customer.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and if you're lucky, they've defined this is CUI, right? They've given you that form. In a lot of cases, you don't
Not
get
lucky.
that.
Yeah.
Army
right.
Corps of
Yeah.
Engineers is not doing it. Navy is not doing it yet. Neither one.
I think
Nice.
this is definitely a stage where we're going to want to walk through a set of questions and double check we've got more than just these 2 ESPs.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the same thing for assets. I have a list of assets that's on that network diagram, right? We can see them. We can see them here. You've got phones and printers and laptops and firewalls, right? But I think you want to go through a list of those and make sure you got everything and create a formal inventory. I would like to see that in some kind of spreadsheet or in CMDB if possible. I mean, those would all be great if we could do something like that. At a minimum, at least the spreadsheet.
I can take that action item.
What I haven't said here yet is when we talk about this, what level are we doing? Are we doing level 2 here?
Yes.
Yeah,
We'll be talking about, is it a CRMA? Is it an SP? I mean, all these different categories of assets as well. We'll have to go over specialized asset, etc. That's a bit of a discussion in its own. I think from there, you identify the requirements, which is basically you're at this level, it's that type of asset, these requirements apply to it. Right? That's rather easy to do once you've done the categorization of assets. Love to hear who's going to be on this, right? So how much of Elvis's time are we going to have as we start doing this readiness assessment? And how much of time are we going to have from MSP Tech? And we know we're not going to get any time from Microsoft. Right, they're gonna point you to a website and say, "There's our documents," but there's no time there. Right, they're not going to sit in on an interview.
Yeah.
And then I think the next step there is to formally perform the readiness assessment, which is walking through each one of the requirements on each one of the assets and seeing if we think you are compliant or not. It's our impression of what the assessor would say.
Okay.
Right.
And it sounds like a good plan.
Yeah,
We're moving in the right direction. I think Nova Shield should be getting that certification hopefully sometime this year. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, if they start sticking those boxes and limiting that PPS, sure, we might let them get through.
Cool. All right, Doug. I think we have clear next steps. I'll get you that asset inventory and with the categorization of our assets. So that should help with what you're doing, the data flow diagram and any other with your tasks.
If you share that with me, Derek, I will put together a list of the corresponding benchmarks and STIGs.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I'll share out just the whole presentation, which is the 4 slides.
Thanks, Doug.